Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast, as we're now going to go across the NFL as a whole, and we're going to be handing out grades to each of the first-round rookies that were selected in the 2024 draft. Now, of course, just as a reminder, this is based off of 1 week of play. It's not an indictment on who they are as a player as a whole, but with that being said, let's get into it. As first off, of course, we have Caleb Williams. And for the record, we're going to be doing this NFC first and then AFC, but had to start with Caleb Williams, who had a very tough game on his hands against the Tennessee Titans. That's a defense that definitely does have its share of talent, but for him to look the way that he did, the times that he did have space in front of him, just missing throws, bad decision making, specifically in regards to taking bad sacks, which was a bad habit of his during college, that he has a lot of areas to improve coming out of this game. We just talked at length about it yesterday, about how I am confident he's going to be able to respond to this and work from there, but, it really only goes up from here, because 14 of 29, just 93 passing yards, nowhere near sort of the expectations for Caleb heading into the season, and I am confident that he's going to be able to get better from here. Jayden Daniels, the number 2 overall pick, I am giving him a B. I don't think I mentioned as well, Caleb Williams, giving him a D. Jayden Daniels is a B. Ultimately, a very solid debut for him. Now, it was nothing spectacular, but especially considering the fact, like we mentioned earlier in the show, there was a lot of bad quarterback play over this past weekend, and Jayden Daniels was not in that conversation. Ultimately, 17 of 24, 184 yards, added an additional 88 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns on the ground. That Jayden, I understand if you are a little bit of a skeptic on Jayden Daniels, in terms of being a passer, he didn't really give you a massive boat of confidence in that area. But either way, at least, again, considering how rough a lot of the NFL looked in the passing game anyways, Jayden Daniels showed that he is capable of being an NFL quarterback. And again, his legs are a weapon. Ultimately, it's going to be, at least in my opinion, I'm going to need to see him sort of impress through the air as well. But those legs can move, man, and they add this different element to the Washington Commanders offense that is absolutely going to be utilized this year. Get down, avoid taking the hits. That's obviously the biggest thing with Jayden Daniels, but ultimately, I thought it was pretty good, pretty encouraging overall. And if you're a Jayden Daniels believer, this was sort of the baseline of what you should be hoping to get from him. We're now 4th overall pick, Marvin Harrison Jr. Basically radio silence from him in this game, where it was very much disappointing. Ultimately, he ended up catching just 1 pass, and it was disappointing for a lot of people, I'm sure for himself, and especially for anybody like myself that also has him in fantasy football. But I really don't blame him for this situation. The first half was very run heavy from the Arizona Cardinals anyways. They were having success on the ground, so ultimately that was kind of just their game plan. And then I didn't love the way that ultimately things were drawn up for him. It was a lot of him just running deep, and Kyler Murray wasn't looking for that. Clearly, he wasn't looking for that when Marvin Harrison broke free and had nothing but space in front of him on that final drive, where could have been the go-ahead touchdown there. But I'm not worried about him as a player. Now, some of the comments as well that Kyler made afterwards, and I want to root for Kyler, but sometimes just the things that he says to the media, talking about how it's not his job to get the ball to MHJ. I mean, who else's job is it really? But that's a whole different note there. But ultimately, I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be just fine. This was obviously a very quiet performance, though. I'm giving him a C-. Next up, Malik Nabers, the other, top drafted wide receiver in this class. He had a lot more opportunities, and he absolutely took advantage of them in this game. And Nabers is somebody that, for years now, the Giants have been looking for a true number one wide receiver, and it seems like maybe Nabers can develop into that. 7 targets, 5 catches, 66 yards. This is a Giants offense that is maybe a little bit dysfunctional, but Nabers, I think he's an excellent route runner. You see the athleticism and the burning speed when he gets into space. I think he's going to be excellent for the Giants moving forward. I have him with a B from week 1. Rome Odunze, he did play in this game. Not going to spend much time on this. Ends up getting hurt with an MCL sprain. The Bears offense as a whole was obviously very stagnant, but Odunze now expected to miss maybe weeks here. He is listed as week to week as things currently stand. I'm not giving him a grade for this based off of the fact that he did get injured, but I at least wanted to acknowledge that he did play in the game. Talais Fuaga was incredible. Maybe the best rookie that I watched personally this past weekend. Now, an offensive tackle, definitely not going to get the clicks or pop off the screen, but he was excellent in this game. No pressures allowed at all through the pass game. Now, you're playing the Carolina Panthers defense, so you do have to take that into consideration. But Fuaga was flawless in this game, and he is somebody that I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on moving forward. I have him with an A. Byron Murphy, second. I thought that he was good overall. He didn't have a huge impact on the game. I was a lot more negative on him maybe coming into the season, but ultimately he had a couple tackles, had a couple pressures. He could definitely be in the C+ category. I do have him as a C, but that's sort of a loose C. Maybe I should have leaned on the more optimistic side, but if you disagree on this one, let me know in the comments section. Dallas Turner, I have with a B, had a few tackles, did record his first career sack in this game for the Vikings. I think that Turner is going to be somebody that will have a very impactful NFL career. The issue is, at this point, the Vikings do have a lot of other edge rushers that they just brought in this offseason in Jonathan Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel. So we did see limited reps for Dallas Turner, just over 50% of the defensive snaps as a whole. Something that we did anticipate a little bit, but ultimately, he showed that athleticism, the sack coming on a loop where he was able to come around his defensive tackle and just jumped on the back of Daniel Jones. Ultimately, thought it was a nice debut for Dallas Turner. Nothing extraordinary, but very good. I'm giving him a B. Jared Verse of the Los Angeles Rams, another edge rusher. I think some of the pro football focus stuff is maybe a little bit higher on him than I was. Verse is a nice edge rusher and will definitely have an impact on the pass rush game. But that being said, and I want to give him credit because he had a couple of quarterback hurries. He ended up getting home for a sack on the final play of the first half. I thought it was a good first half as a whole. The second half was a lot quieter from him, and really my biggest issue with him ultimately was just how he looked in the run game. I didn't think it was very comfortable. There were a number of different instances where playing on that contain edge spot, he sort of gambled inside too often. It seems like he likes using that inside leverage, but it sort of got him caught a couple times. Now, I do wonder if maybe that is partially a schematic thing for the Rams because, again, Verse, whenever he could, he was going to the inside, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but there were a couple times where he ended up getting washed down and the Lions just ended up running right outside him on multiple occasions, including the first play of overtime as well, where he bit really hard on a fake inside. Ultimately, Jameson Williams came around outside and picked up 10 yards, basically where Verse was supposed to be. So I think he has a little bit of a work in progress maybe in that context, but ultimately a pretty good game from him. I have him with a C+. Quinyon Mitchell, cornerback for the Philadelphia Eagles. This is one I had a hard time bouncing between a C and a C+. Ultimately, Mitchell was targeted heavy in this game. Passed to 10 times, 5 catches allowed, 86 yards. Did have 2 pass deflections. Ultimately, it was a little bit of a mixed bag. Now, he didn't commit, any plays too egregious. I don't believe allowed any touchdowns. So, I maybe could have gone a little bit higher with Mitchell's grade here. But ultimately, not a bad debut. The fact that he got targeted 10 times, maybe makes you think that Jordan Love thought that he could take a little bit more advantage. 86 yards is somewhat significant, but ultimately, I just sort of marked it out as a standard cornerback game, and I did give him a C. Terrion Arnold, another cornerback, this time for the Detroit Lions. My favorite cornerback coming out of this draft, and I have him with a B-. Ultimately, I thought he was excellent in the first half. Second half was a little bit more rough at times. Had a couple pass interference calls against him in the end zone, which did somewhat hurt the Lions. Actually, one of the times, Rams sort of hurt themselves and ultimately didn't even end up scoring there. But I thought that Arnold, all things considered, the Rams passing defense is good. He was matching up against Cooper Kupp a lot. Really, there was only one significant catch allowed, I thought, when he was in man-to-man against Cooper Kupp. He just got cooked a little bit there, but it's also Cooper Kupp, so there has to be some sense of leeway. Arnold definitely also benefited from the defensive line wreaking havoc, and ultimately, maybe if things were a little bit different there, we could have seen him get attacked more, but I am giving him a B- for this game. Jordan Morgan, offensive lineman for the Green Bay Packers. This is another one, maybe I went slightly too low on this. Morgan didn't start the game, but did end up getting 20-plus snaps, most of which coming at guard, where he took over for a little bit, and he was very solid in those instances. I gave him a C because I thought he was sort of in that average range, but ultimately pass blocking, he did a pretty good job as well, so you could talk me into a C+, but I do have him with a C in week 1. Graham Barton, the center for the Buccaneers, starting week 1 for them, won the job in training camp. Thought that it looked really good for the first couple drives. Then at times he got a little bit confused with some of the different stunts that the Washington defense was trying to throw at him. It seemed like mentally he was growing stronger as the game went on there. I thought he was good overall. Ultimately was not a liability on that offensive line whatsoever. Is going to face tougher defenses than Washington moving forward here, so we'll see. But I give him a B-. I thought he was very solid. Tyler Guyton, offensive tackle for the Dallas Cowboys. He had a tough matchup in front of him. That Browns defense and Myles Garrett especially lining up across from him a lot throughout the game. He ended up allowing a number of different pressures. He had some of the worst Pro Football Focus grades out of any offensive lineman in the league this past week. 42 PFF grade overall, which was the 5th lowest mark among all tackles, according to Pro Football Focus. And additionally, like I mentioned, very tough matchup against Myles Garrett and all of that Browns defense. So I do give him a little bit of a pass, but Guyton is somebody that I thought was a little bit raw coming out of college, and it's not like he screamed NFL ready with this game 1 performance. I do have him with a D+. Then Xavier Legette, final NFC rookie here. Ultimately ended up being the leading receiver for the Carolina Panthers, but that's only saying so much because there wasn't a lot there. Thought that Legette had, a big play on one of the touchdown drives for the Panthers that ultimately, was able to connect with Bryce Young on a nice little rollout to the left for Bryce. Ended up picking up 20 yards or so. I give him a B-. I think that he can emerge as one of the top guys for this Panthers team, but It's also, there's just so much dysfunction on that Panthers offensive side of the ball anyways that it is a little bit difficult to fully evaluate a wide receiver like Leggett. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section. That was the NFC side of things, and now we are going to be moving on to the AFC first-round rookies. But before we do so, we do have to take a quick break. Stick with us. We will be right back.